Hi, this is Justin.
Hi, it's Alyssa. What's your name?
Aria.
Jessica.
All right, so I'm just going to start with a little bit about a guy from Chicago that was interviewed by the DePaul University newspaper. I thought that was interesting. That came up when I was doing some research about bikes. So basically this guy from the city was interviewed by a guy from DePaul, and he was telling a story about how he grew up in Chicago, bicycled as a kid, and then started bicycling to work as he got older. And it was a while ago that he started doing this, and people weren't very happy with cyclists because they would take up the road, get yelled at, profanities would be yelled. Got used to it, grew a tough skin, but then one day he was biking home from work and heard some other people yelling at him again, and decided to look over and saw a bunch of kids, and they said, "Hey, nice bike," and it was a little bit different from what he had heard growing up, and biking to work, something nice. So he goes on in this interview to talk about how the culture of biking's changed and how fixies and different cycles are respected, and Chicago is more of a biking city than it used to be. So just thought I'd start with that, and then talk about why I care about bikes before I get started. So I go to college. College is a great place. College campus is a great place for biking. So that's one reason, and then also I've gotten in the habit of buying bikes, taking them apart, making them better, and then reselling them. This one's got a lot of work to do, but that's been a hobby of mine, so I've grown to like that. So I just want to talk about bikes in general, the different types of bikes. I'm going to talk about how they're made, just a couple different pieces of that, and then the difference between this type of bike and a normal 21 gear bike or a mountain bike or whatever. So I'm just going to get started with talking about the types of bikes. First, you have road bikes. This is what you see a lot of people in the city riding. They can have, like I said, like up to 21 gears for shifting, go up hills with a low gear, go down hills with a high gear. You can ride a lot of miles. That's what they ride in the Tour de France, like 100 miles a day. Those are road bikes, and then you have mountain bikes, which, as the name infers, are meant for the mountains and for trails. They have high suspension for you going up and down bumps, and tires are a lot thicker than road bike tires for keeping the air when you're going off the bumps and whatnot. And then I classified the last category in this type of thing as an urban bike, which would include cruisers and fixed gear, which is basically one-geared bike. And these are urban bikes because they're built for simplicity. They have low maintenance, and oftentimes in cities you don't have a lot of hills, so it makes it easy to ride and not worry about shifting gears. So I'm going to move on to how the bikes are made. I'm going to just start with the frame. The frame is usually a diamond, as you can see, the 5 different tubes. So I'm going to start by talking about the tubes. And there's 2 different ways that you can make the tubes. One, you can start out, this is the better way of doing it, the more sturdy and strong way. You can start out with a big chunk of steel and heat it up and pierce it right down the middle, and then expand it out to become a tube, and then let it cool. The second way is by just having a flat sheet of steel and then curling it and sealing it. And those aren't quite as strong. Obviously, if it's not one piece, it might crack in the middle. So that's how the tubes are made, and then I'm just going to talk about how they're connected. Really interesting stuff. You can either weld it together, which this would be examples of where it would be welded together. And that's the cheaper, faster way of doing it. Aaliyah, can I have your help in a couple minutes on my speech? Okay, I'm going to tell you when. The second way of doing it is by brazing. Brazing is something I just learned about. It's where you weld at a lower temperature, and then as you're welding the pieces together, you put a filler in, which is usually copper or silver, and it kind of forms around the edges, and that's what mine is. You can see it's a lot smoother than just if you were to weld something together. Welding usually has bubbles, whereas this one, you can see that the pieces are all clean in between. tubes. And then the last part about the building the bikes that I want to talk about was the wheels. The wheels are a little bit more complex than some of the other stuff. A lot of the components are made by machines, but the wheels have to be handmade, at least once you get to the spokes. So first the rim is made, and that is machine made. First I talked about the rim, and then the spokes. So the spokes are the tough part. They're hand threaded through each hole in the rim and connected to the piece in the middle. And then the person that's making the bike has to go through one by one and measure how tight it is and then fix it to make it equal to the others. And he keeps doing that over and over again until it's all the same. And then it spins straight rather than, if you've seen a bike when it's come off a wreck or something bad, it kind of goes like this as the wheel goes. And I have a story about that. I was driving down I-70 highway and my sister's bike came off the bike rack and went flying onto the highway while I was going 75, so both of the wheels actually looked like this when it got done, and the bike is totaled, but that's an example of what not a true tire looks like. So the last part of the speech is about the difference between this type of bike compared to a normal road bike, like a 21 speed or something like that. So this obviously has the one gear. I never shift on a bike like this, and there's two types of one-speeded bike. There's called a single speed and a fixed gear. Hey, oh yeah, can you come help me pedal it? So a single speed is what this is. Can you push this in circles? And when, nope, like this, push it. So when you pedal, it pushes the tire, but then when you stop, it coasts. A fixed gear, when you pedal, it moves the tire with the pedal, and when you slow down, this tire slows down at the same rate. It's all connected. So that type of bike, the fixed gear, is a lot more difficult to ride because you never get a brake on your legs. And I have a brake, as you can see, but a fixed gear doesn't usually have a brake because you're supposed to use your legs, which is very difficult and why I like to have the brake. So why do people like to ride fixed gears when they're harder? People say, well, I would agree with this because I have something similar, but the maintenance is really low. I used to go into bike stores and say, hey, will you fix my bike? And they'd find 15 things wrong. When there's only one or two moving parts, there's a lot less that can go wrong. And people say, I feel like it's kind of like driving a manual car. A fixed gear is simpler, you have a better feel for the road. You can control it more like a manual car, I guess, when you're doing all the pedaling and all the braking manually. And then also people say that it's a fashion statement, the more brightly colored bike with the big rims and the cool saddles and whatnot can be a fashion piece. So that's it. I just want to close. I wrote down a couple tips for you guys from good and bad experiences I've had. One is to bike because it keeps you in shape, right? My second one is when you're taking a bike apart, if that ever happens, take pictures of every step because bikes are a lot more complex than I ever knew, and I get very frustrated when I'm putting them back together, so just a helpful hint. And then also know what kind of bike you're riding. A story about a friend in college. He was riding a fixed gear and he didn't realize there was no brakes, so he was pedaling, and then he realized he had to stop and had no way of doing that, so he put all his weight to try to stop the pedals from moving, but he was going too fast, so he flipped over the handlebars and went flying onto the street. And he had a big, I remember a big shoulder cut thing that was about this big on his arm. So don't do that. And then lastly, when biking long distances, like I did today, 20 miles, always wear biking shorts to keep your bottom from getting hurt. That's it.